All right, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to add jQuery. So what is jQuery? First of all, if you don't know that or you're not familiar with it, jQuery is actually it's a JavaScript library. So JavaScript is something that all browsers support natively, but there are different JavaScript libraries and frameworks. jQuery is one of them. You know, Angular is another one, for instance. There are lots of different ones, okay? And jQuery is the one that we're going to be using. It's a pretty well-known library. It's pretty easy to use. And what it does is it basically has a bunch of functions that are written, and you can use their functions, and they're in a lot of ways more efficient, and sometimes they are more just user-friendly in terms of the way that you can program with them and so on, and they just allow for a lot more efficient and effective coding. So we need to load the jQuery library in order for it to even work. All right, so let's do that. The way that I'm going to do it is if you go and open a new tab and you just do a Google search for jQuery CDN, the CDN, I'm going to click on that. It's your first hit right here. Okay, so the CDN is going to be, it's a core library that is available through the network, so that what's really nice about it is that whenever you link to the CDN, it's sort of, kind of, sort of, not exactly, right? It's a hosted library, but it's kind of like, you know, linking to Google's web hosting fonts or something, you know, where it goes and it finds an external resource on the web. It loads the page that you give it permission to load into your web page, and the thing that's nice about it is that it'll stay cached. And because it's so widely used, jQuery is so widely used, and it's so widely used on, you know, with so many different developers, then a lot of the websites that you already go to are going to use these jQuery CDNs, and so there's a very good chance that you already even have it cached up into your browser already, and you don't have to reload it, or that the server has it cached. So in a lot of ways, that makes it kind of fast. So anyway, what you can do is you can use any of these releases. We're going to go ahead and use the most um, uh, modern one, so the 3.2.1. And what we're going to do is we're going to choose the minified. Okay, and what you want to do is click on that, and then you want to take this, and you can either copy it with your clipboard, or you can just click on this, copy to clipboard like that, and it's going to put that into your clipboard, so that now we can go over to Dreamweaver and we can paste it in somewhere. And the way that you load a CDN, or any, you know, pretty much any other kind of jQuery or other library, is that you need to either put it up in the head or somewhere like maybe down in the footer. You can also sometimes put it right next to the item that's going to be actionable if it's a dynamic thing, and you don't want to load it unless it has to be used. But what we're going to do is we're going to load it, instead of putting it like up in the head, which is probably what you've done in the past. I'm going to put it down here in the footer. I'm going to go all the way down, and not in the footer, but below the footer, I should say, before the end of the body tag. All right, and then I'm going to just paste it right here. Oops. Okay, it didn't like that. Let's try putting that into the clipboard again. All right, this time I'm gonna try it differently. I'll right click and copy it, and let's see if it behaves any differently, and we'll paste it. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna just go ahead and get rid of that extra hard return. What this is going to do is that it prevents me from having to download a copy of the actual jQuery library and then reference it. I can just reference the one that's on the network this way. All right, so I'm going to use this script tag, and that should load jQuery for me. And so let's go ahead and save it, and we're going to test it. Oh, and by the way, the reason I like to put this down in the footer is because jQuery is really resource intensive. And so let's say that somebody's on a slow mobile device, and it requires a lot of extra processing for them to load all that jQuery. Well, if you put it at the very top of your page in the head, then it's going to load before the rest of the page loads, and so it might slow down everything else in the page. Because this is not, you know, like the entire page does not completely and totally depend on, you know, immediately having this jQuery loaded, say the way that some other things do, like fonts and things like that, and the CSS. I'm going to load it down at the bottom so that it's the last to load, and it's still going to load super fast. It's just not going to be the thing that like slows everything else down. So that's the reason it's at the bottom. Okay, so let's save that, and then let's jump back over to our page, and I'm going to hit refresh. And then what we can do to test it to see that it actually is loading it properly is I'm just going to come down here near the footer, and I'm going to inspect it, and we're going to take a peek. So after the footer, you see here in the HTML that we've got the script tag. And so if we wanted to just see, that it's actually loading properly, what I can do is I can go right click it and say open in a new tab. And then you see it shows me the entire library, which means that it is able to actually read it. If for some reason you click on a link on a resource like that, and it takes you to something that's empty, or it says it's forbidden or something, then it's actually not loading the library, and your jQuery is not going to work. So be aware of that. Like if you're having problems and it seems like your jQuery is not working, make sure that you go and just, try to right click this and say open in a new tab and see if it actually loads your library. That's really important. The other thing too is if you did decide not to use the CDN and you just instead you decided that you wanted to download the actual jQuery library file yourself and link to it, sometimes whenever you download files from websites like that, it'll download it with bad permissions, and then you go and you put it on a server, and the server doesn't have access to the permission, so sometimes it'll say that nobody but you can read the file. And so just be aware if that happens, you might have to actually go and change the permissions on the file by right-clicking it and going into the properties of it and stuff. Okay, let's go back over here, and let's now write some custom jQuery. So we need a script tag, all right, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a type. Oops, hold on a second. My trackpad hit something else. Okay, so we're going to type, and I'm going to say that it's a JavaScript. Okay, and you don't have to do that, but it's not a bad practice to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and try to clean this tag up so that there we go. It's in line with the other script tag. Okay, so now I need to write a function that's going to go inside of the script tag that's going to do what we want it to do, now that we have the jQuery library that we can manipulate. So I'm going to use the ready function, and the way that the ready function works, right, is that we have the thing in front of it that we're going to manipulate with ready. And basically what ready does is it makes sure that the thing that's in the parentheses before it is actually ready to be used. And so the thing that we want to make sure is actually ready is the document. And so the document is literally this entire HTML document. We need to make sure that the whole document is ready to be manipulated, okay, so that it's been loaded and stuff. Okay, so that's, and if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I pulled up this for you. It's you can go to jQuery API. It's actually api.jquery.com, and then you can search for any kind of function. And the thing that's also nice about jQuery is a lot of the function names are somewhat intuitive. Not all of them are, but some of them are pretty intuitive. So like if you think that there's a thing you want to do, like to swap something out, you could type the word swap, you could, and just see what kinds of things pop up. And it has really good documentation on how to use it. And so for instance, you would want to make sure that your document is ready, and then you would write the handler so that you know what it's supposed to be doing. And in this case, what we're going to do here is we're going to have basically include a function here. So what we want to type is actually the word function, and then, oops, and then we want to have an open curly brace, right? And then what this does is it's saying, okay, when the document is ready, then go ahead and run this function, okay? And so now that gives us an empty space where we can actually create a function that we want to run, okay? So this syntax is important, and if you, as I said before, if you need sort of a point of reference, you can always go back to this. And the other thing that you could do too is that you could look up literally jQuery document ready if you wanted to make sure that you're getting syntax correct. And it's got some hits here. The second hit you could go there, and it probably has some. Anyway, you can figure some stuff out. And also W3 Schools has really good things to look at. Okay. Anyway, so we've got the document ready now. That's the idea. And then now we need to write some stuff that's going to toggle that menu for us. To trigger it, we want to be able to click on something. So first of all, let's use the click handler. So we need something that's going to look like this, right? And that's going to be our basic syntax. And then in the first position is going to be the actual trigger. And if we go back up to the top, and just scroll up here really quick, the button that we're actually going to be using as our trigger is this anchor link whose ID is menu. So we can just put the ID of menu in as our trigger. So, and because we're looking for an ID that's a string, then we need quotation marks. So I'm going to put hashtag menu, because remember, hashtag is what identifies something as an ID. And so it'll look for an ID called menu. And when you click on it, we're going to run a function. All right. And that way we've now got the syntax for this next set. So what I just typed was function, and then, open, close parenthesis, and then opening curly brace, it automatically did its ending curly brace. I hit the return key to make a container now for what's going to happen when I click the menu button. Now, what is going to happen when I click the menu button? Let's go back up here and take a look again. What we had talked about is, we want to be able to make this global nav container actually change in height, and the way we can do that is by swapping out a class right here. And so we want to be able to basically toggle a class. I don't have to actually remove this class called null, but what I can do is I can just do a toggle class. So I can toggle the class on and off, and what it'll do is it'll just basically add something here. Like if I wanted to call it nav open, for instance, you would end up seeing something added that would be called nav open, and then whenever I would click it again, it would basically remove it. Okay, so that's what we're going to try to do. So let's go back down here and get the handler ready. So we're going to do the same kind of deal, and the handler that we're using now is called toggle class. And you'll see that it's prompting me, and it is camel case. So make sure that you type your camel case correctly with the capital C right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and complete that. And then in the trigger, right, the trigger that is going to, get affected is going to be nav pound global nav. Okay, and if you remember, that makes sense, right? Because global nav ID is assigned to nav. So just be aware that that's how we're going to do it. So it's going to toggle a class on this element, right? So it's going to add and remove a class on this particular element of nav, global nav. And the class that we're going to toggle, all right, is going to be called nav underscore open. I haven't made that yet, but it's something I'm going to make. All right, and so because what we're going to end up doing is we're going to set the default behavior in smaller viewports, like anything under 600. We're going to set it so that basically that's going to be the normal state, because we're doing mobile first approach, right? It's going to be closed. When we are in a mobile view, we'll be able to click that button and have it expand open, okay, so that it changes the class and doesn't limit the height on it, if you remember what we talked about before. Okay, so now I don't need to do anything else here, because I'm not going to have a function within a function again. I'm just going to do a regular termination on it, and nothing is going to actually work, in terms of like collapsing anything just yet, but let's just make sure that this is actually working, that our syntax is right. So I'm going to save this, and I'll show you how to check it. We can come back over here to our page. I'll hit refresh, and first thing is first, you can come down here and make sure that in fact our stuff is actually showing up, and it does seem to be. And so now what we can do is go up here, and actually let's go up here, and if I go where it says banner, section ID equals banner, and then I go to nav, this is actually what we're going to be looking for, is right in here. Okay, where it says class equals null, I have it highlighted. We should see it add and remove a class whenever I click on menu. You see here, I clicked on menu and it added nav open. If I click it again, it makes it go away. Okay, and so there's not a problem that says null because I'm just not going to write a rule for that, and it won't load anything. It's no big deal. And I do want to jump back really quickly over here to show you something that occurred to me might actually be a little confusing to you, is that I realized when I typed this, here I use single quotes and here I use double quotes. It actually doesn't matter here. I could have used double quotes and it would have worked just fine. Okay, just so that you're aware of that. Now, the other thing that I need you to understand that might be a little bit confusing is here in the trigger area, you see whenever I'm calling an ID, I have to have the hashtag in front of the ID name. By the same token, if I were to call a class, I would have to have a dot in front of it. Here is, the word nav, that's just an element name, so it doesn't need anything in front of it. So the thing that is kind of confusing sometimes to people who are new to this is that whenever you're actually calling a class, in this first position, you would put a dot as if it was reading the CSS kind of, right? But in reality, it's actually looking at an element in the HTML. It's trying to select an element in the DOM or document object model. But over here, you might look at this and go, well, wait, there's no dot in front of nav open, even though it's a class. Well, that's because this handler is actually manipulating specifically a class. It knows that it's a class and it's creating the name of a class that's going to toggle on and off, right? So it's identifying, I shouldn't say that it's creating it, but it's creating the instance in the DOM of the class name, and it knows that it's a class already. So as opposed to like toggle ID or something like that, it would be an ID name. All right, so I just want to point that out so that you don't get confused and think, well, wait, why is there no dot here? Am I mistyping it versus having a hashtag here and here? So I just wanted to make that clear. So let's move on to the next video where we're going to do some more stuff with this.